You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, Ben Eagle. To listen to previous episodes, visit thinkingcountry.com or find the podcast on iTunes by searching for Meet the Farmers. Hello and welcome to episode 36 of Meet the Farmers. Today I'm with Suffolk-based arable farmers Patrick and Brian Barker, cousins who farm here at Lodge Farm in mid-Suffolk. The land here is family owned and has a total area of about 500 hectares. Brian and Patrick focus on being a productive commercial arable farm whilst maximising opportunities for wildlife. Indeed, conservation is central to their ethos. Back in 2009, they were awarded the Silver Lapwing Award, and in 2010 they won Countryside Farmer of the Year at the Farmers Weekly Awards. They take active research very seriously and have previously been a monitor farm for the Homegrown Cereals Authority, as well as the Agriculture and Horticulture Development Board. They're currently an AHDB strategic farm, a leaf demonstration farm, that's linking environment and farming, and Patrick is on the steering committee of the Nature Friendly Farming Network. Guys, thank you so much for... I feel like we've been trying to get this sorted for quite a while, so it's pretty interesting to be sitting here with you. Start by telling me about your rotation and what you're growing at.
Yeah, we have a 12-year rotation based around herbage grass seed. We've been growing herbage grass seed for golf courses and football pitches for probably, well, it must be since the 70s. And that has basically taken on our main break crop. And so we follow that with winter wheat and another winter wheat straight after that. And then we use break crops of spring linseed, spring beans, trying some canary seed this year. And then we've also grown oilseed rape in the past, but we've actually dropped it due to basically having to spray it every 10 days. So we're trying to use a long-term rotation based around the grass lay in the middle of it to give us the full soil health benefits and cultural controls, allowing us to use different chemical spectrums for different weeds and diseases. So we're just trying to do the most appropriate thing for each field as we go through the seasons, really.
How long have you been working together and who does what?
We have been doing this now since around 2005, 2006, I think it was. Seems an awful long time ago now, when we were young
and I had hair,
keen and fresh faced. I didn't have any.
I know what that's like.
I didn't have any grey hairs. The way it came about was that we've always, as cousins, we've always grown up together. It's always been a family farm. Both our fathers farmed together. My father David ran the pig enterprise, and Brian's father Roy ran the arable enterprise, and they always dovetailed pretty well together. And then in 2005, we had the opportunity to have a look at the farm and actually kind of look at it as a career for us as opposed to a family business, and we sat down and just made a plan on what we felt we could do if we were to take it on. We looked at all the things that we didn't like, that we thought were funny the way our dads did it, and we came up with a plan and kind of sat down with them and said, look, we're serious about taking this on. This is what we think and this is what we'd like to do and this is the direction we would like to go. And they were both very receptive to that. My dad was getting to the point where he was fed up of keeping pigs. And it was at a time just before the price of wheat rocketed up to £200 a tonne, and the abattoir and in fact closed around us, and in fact the haulier that we were using went out of business as well. So it was a time when pigs was pretty difficult, and our kind of just enthusiasm and some fresh ideas meant that we could work with our fathers moving forwards, and we were able to develop the business how we felt it should be moved forward, but also with them there to guide us and make sure we didn't do anything too controversial. And it gave us a really good opportunity to kind of forge out a career path for ourselves in an industry that we were both really, really keen to be involved with.
And nearly 15 years down the line, how happy are you with, based on that original plan of that ethos and an idea of where you were going, how happy are you with how things have gone and how much work is there still to do?
Every day is a learning day, that's what I say. We've been very fortunate that things that we put into place have come out well for us. One thing I always say is that we were never given the opportunity to do this as a family business. We both went to university and did completely different things from agriculture at the start, so we saw a different side of the industry. Patrick did sports science, I did environmental science, and then we sort of came to the point that we actually saw that this was a viable future, and we saw the business being here and something we want to take forward. So actually we've gone on and done it because we were passionate to do it. A few things have sort of fallen. You mentioned the Farmers Weekly Award for countryside management and the Silver Lapwing. That was the sort of springboard that thrust us into the limelight, and we then sort of had to ride that wave going forward, but also we knew that we were then doing good stuff and we wanted to develop it and take it further in future years. It's been a roller coaster of a ride, but at the end of the day we're still here and we're passionate about our industry that we're involved in.
You mentioned that sort of different background and going off and doing other things. Brian, with your background in environmental science and I think you're probably both widely known as much with your conservation hat on as your farming hat. But where does that interest in wildlife come from? I assume it's from quite a young age.
Yeah, for me, growing up on this farm and growing up in this village, we were surrounded by wildlife. My father had always a real passion for hedgerows and spent a lot of the 1970s, 1980s planting hedgerows when other people were taking them out. And his interest in trees and hedges and the wildlife was always there. As a small boy, I was the sort who would always be going out and picking up feathers and coming home with pockets full of tadpoles and all the sort of things that people do. I always had a fascination in nest boxes and birds' nests as well, and would always be looking in nest boxes. So for me, being able to demonstrate that we can have a farm that's full of wildlife and something that we can really impact was kind of at the core of what we wanted to do when we set about farming and kind of devising a plan on how we thought we could run a business and how we could develop a farm so it would be relatively future-proof.
What about you, Brian?
Well, the same really. We've always grown up with it. Going back further than our parents, our grandparents, Eric and Ella, both real Suffolk custodians of the countryside, met in a hayfield somewhere in Suffolk, didn't they? That's the story. And just across the village border. And they installed it, shooting, conservation, farming. Grandfather understood the ways of the countryside, and that was installed into our parents. My dad was much more involved in the shooting, the conservation of sort of game bird shooting, and I then picked up that, and so we have come around to the same sort of direction, but in two very different routes. My parents didn't like flying, so we ended up going to national parks in Britain for all our summer holiday or Easter holidays, and so my parents were then telling me about glaciation and all this sort of stuff and walking the moors and things like that. So yeah, we've always been brought up with conservation and wildlife, and that's sort of comes through quite evident that that's why we're going to farm and we enjoy seeing it.
I mentioned in the introduction that you are a strategic farm for the AHDB. What's involved in being a strategic farm?
This is a opportunity that came through being part of the Monitor Farm programme for the AHDB. The Monitor Farm programme is knowledge exchange from farmer to farmer, based around a signal business. So our business was looked at as a monitor farm for 3 years, and it was described to me as undressing your business in public for everyone to bear all and see all, and that's what I did. Thoroughly enjoyed breaking down our business, and it gave me an opportunity to take a step back and look in and give me the opportunity to change our farming system. That came to an end, and obviously then I met and sort of got to know what the value of the AHDB sort of delivered for farmers within the UK, and they wanted to take this knowledge exchange a step further. They found that there was a void between top-end research coming from John Innes and the other research, Rothenstead and places like that. There's lots of research being done, but not much was being transferred onto farm. And farmers like to listen to farmers. They don't like reading research papers. And so the strategic farm sort of idea was created. I was the first for cereals and oilseeds in the UK. They've got them for potatoes, dairy, and I think there was some more in the livestock world before the oilseeds and cereals. But we're trying to bring research down onto the farm, doing large-scale field trials, which then get explained and shown to farmers by farmers. And so hopefully from that, farmers then take the research that they've seen or the trials or the ideas away to then implement them on their own farm, so that the knowledge exchange wheels turn quicker. And then that feeds into the Monitor Farm network and then goes into the arable business groups, which are then the web of information coming through the AHDB. So if you haven't been involved, get involved with your local Monitor Farm group. They're across the country. And then come and see the strategic farms across the country. There's one up in the west for the oils, the seeds and cereals. So yeah, it's all about knowledge exchange and sort of opening our eyes to research and getting it on farm, really.
Anyone who follows you on social media will have seen in recent times that there's a connection between the Barkers and underwear. Pant-Man, what's this all about?
This came off the back of the Monitor Farm programme. The first year was completed, and I was a bit worried that there was going to be a little lull through the harvest period and into the winter meetings. And I was just perusing YouTube and Twitter, as you do, and I saw a Canadian soil scientist called Vince Blake pull a pair of pants out of the ground, and it was just a dirty pair of boxers fluttering in the wind, and he goes, "This is what bad soil is all about. There's no decomposition. The 100% cotton organic matter has not been touched by the fungi, the bacteria, the earthworms. It hasn't been cycled. This soil is just basically dead. It's been battered into submission by the farmer." And then he walked over the road, and in a field that had been no-tilled for about 10 years and sympathetically managed with conservation agricultural methods, they dug out a pair of pants that had been in there exactly the same length of time, and all it was a elastic waistband and the polyester ticket. And he said, "This is what good soil is all about. Loads of activity, loads of biology going on, decomposing the 100% cotton, which is basically organic matter, which is fueling the soil."
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this is quite an interesting thing to do. And I phoned the AHDB and I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to put it on social media. It may be a flop. It might be a runner. Did a video of my planting the first ever pair of pants in the UK, which is done by choice, not by... And then we did it, and I did it for a series of 8 weeks for the whole calendar year in different cultivation methods, and we found out loads of interesting stuff. You saw loads of different sort of cycles and relationships between no-till, through strip-till, through the plough, through min-till, through grass lays. They all reacted differently at different times due to moisture, due to nutrients, due to biology, to worm numbers. We learned loads and loads of stuff, and it became quite a big thing. And now there's probably thousands of pairs of underpants which have been buried in the last, I think, about 5 years. Yeah. And it's all on social media using #SoilMyUndies. So check it out if you want to see what's going on in your soil.
And I was going to say, it made it into the national press as well.
Yeah, it did.
In the Sun. Bumper harvest.
Yeah, and then it was featured on BBC QI as well. On TV, so yeah, the Sun, Telegraph. Yes, it was an interesting story.
Yeah, good little campaign.
Yeah,
Patrick, take me through some of your conservation work on the farm. What worked well over the years, and perhaps what hasn't worked quite so well?
We were very fortunate when we came into the business was the same time when the high-level, entry-level stewardship schemes were created and released, and a high-level stewardship scheme gave us really the opportunity to look at the farm from a kind of a fresh set of eyes. So we redesigned the farm with the high-level stewardship scheme in mind. So all the areas that were marginal land, all the areas that we knew were wet headlands, and from just the experience of being on the land, we knew that there was plenty of areas of land that we could take out which would actually make farming easier. We sat down with our dads again and kind of just talked through the farm, and Brian's dad said, well, of course, that bit there doesn't grow anything because that's where there was an old pond we filled in the 70s. So we had an idea of the land that we could set aside for wildlife. So in drawing the scheme up, we made the farm a lot more efficient. And having the the base of the environmental stewardship schemes really kind of gave us the ideas that we could do, that we could put in place to create proper habitat through the whole farm. And then in looking at where all our habitats were, Brian came up with the idea that actually, can we have a green corridor through the heart of the farm? We've kind of grown up with some of our father's initiatives when he was involved with, my father's initiatives when he was involved with Suffolk Flag and Suffolk Wildlife Trust.
Yeah.
The Green Veins in the Countryside programme, which was looked at linking up, planting hedges to link up existing habitats. So we've grown up with that, and we looked at this green corridor through the heart of the farm and looked at how we could link up every single habitat on the farm. So we planted new hedges, we put in grass margins, we created this network through the farm, so making the farm an ecosystem on its own. So what we're trying to do is actually have an intensively farmed arable farm, but also have a farm that's full of wildlife at the same time as well. And there's things that we know haven't worked. We know when we've done pond restoration works that if you don't keep on top of them, they just run away from you again. Mm-hmm. So we kind of know the value of ongoing work. But what we've been able to do is we've been able to kind of work to really key principles, that is providing an all-year-round food supply for our farmland wildlife, providing safe rearing and brood rearing and nesting habitat, and providing protection from predators, weather, man, machinery, everything else that we know kind of can affect the species that we're looking at. And just by applying really simple principles, the species that really need our help, we've seen really good increases in their populations. So on this farm, we've gone from having the odd pair of grey partridges to we've got probably 10 breeding pairs now, maybe even up to 12 this year when we start looking at it really in detail. I saw 2 pairs of grey partridges this morning in an area that I've never seen partridges in before on the farm. We also know that by linking up all our ponds, we know our great crested newt population is expanding, not only at the farm at Great Ashfield, but also on this farm at Westhorpe now, where historically there wasn't great crested newts. In doing pond restoration work, we know we've been able to establish a population, and that population is now expanding out as well. So for us, the species that we can really affect, we can actually do a really good job on by applying some real detail and just by linking up these habitats. And there's species in there that we would love to be doing more for, we would love to see greater increases in. So turtle dove is a species that we don't really ever seem to get anywhere, but we know that as a species they're really suffering, and there's a lot of factors out of our control, on migration, on their African wintering grounds. There's things that we can't really affect. And also tree sparrow, we'd love to have tree sparrows here, but everything we do, we just don't seem to get the tree sparrows responding, and they won't hang around and stay. So there's winners and losers in this, but by creating a really strong network of habitats, we take the view that you build it and they will come, and that's the result that we've seen with many of the species that we're trying to benefit.
In the previous episode, I was talking with Georgie Bray about the upcoming ELMS, environmental land management contracts, and the whole system really of public payments for public goods. What do public payments for public goods mean for you, and is this a good thing for farming?
Throw a hand grenade in there.
Got to have some of these questions.
For me, it's going to be difficult for farmers to change their mindset and their approach. At the moment, we've been very much spoon-fed agricultural environment schemes that allowed us still to farm productively, but getting a nice real return back if you're fully involved and you took it as serious with the HLS, with the higher tier that we've got now. But as you've gone on, there's been more and more questions being asked, more evidence required, so farmers are going to get more and more audited, so it's going to become harder. But the mindset that need to change is that farmers have to see the worth that the Treasury or the general public are going to get from those ELMs. And so that's the really tricky part, that farmers are probably not really understanding what they actually are going to be asked to do. And they're looking at it to justify how they farm, where it's going to be a complete flip of that. They've got to justify to the Treasury the worth of changing their farming system. And I think that's where there's going to be a little bit of grey area in the farming industry. And we've been involved with DEFRA. We've had DEFRA out on the farm twice in the build-up to this through Health and Harmony, following on from the agricultural bill. So we've been talking to them. We put in ELM ideas. and we haven't really heard much back. So at the moment, with the uncertainty of political stability that we have with the B word, there's a lot of water that needs to go under the bridge before we get any solid sort of indication of where we're going. But we are trying to make sense of it all. But at the moment, there's, as I say, there's a lot of grey area. But we've got to really change our mindset to look at it from the general public. What do they actually want? What does the Treasury see as payback? And so it's going to be a really interesting time going forward.
Yeah, and I think if you said to many farmers, what could you do differently to make farming better, they'd come up with lots and lots of good ideas. But actually, if you say to them, what would you do differently for better wildlife management, increased biodiversity, better public goods, greater access, all the things, I think farmers are just going to have to really stop and think about what benefits they actually can produce outside of that core business. I think we know farming is going to change fundamentally. The way we farm, everyone is going to have to be thought about a lot more, and where historically everything has been grown for a market that we know is there, I think we're going to have to be thinking a bit more in a bit more streamlined way, a bit more joined up into actually what we're growing, why and where it's going to go before it goes in the ground. So I think there's going to be a little bit more detail required in the planning of what we're doing, but the work that we're going to put in to receiving public money is a whole different kettle of fish, and something that's really going to have to be thought through, and I think still needs a lot of clarity on what farmers are going to be expected to do. But it's a time of change as well. I'm delighted that we are going to be doing this at our age now. I wouldn't want to have been doing it when I was getting a bit older, shall we say, because I think we're at an age where we can embrace it and look to take it on and hopefully see the benefits for us as we move forwards. So, with all these things, there's going to be plenty of positives in there as well. And, it should be an industry that becomes a lot fitter as a result. And there should be opportunities in there for everyone who wants to find them.
Going slightly left field, for a number of years, you ran a care home business, Westhorpe Hall. That's quite far away from farming. Tell me about that story.
Our grandfather bought blocks of farmland right the way through the 70s and up as far as the early 80s. And one of the farmland blocks of farmland that he bought was Hall Farm, Westhorpe, which we bought in 1968, around that kind of time. And the house, Westhorpe Hall, came with the farmland and the farmyard he bought. And they didn't really know what to do with it at the time, so the family who were living there, they let them carry on living there rent-free for a few years. And then in the late 1960s, it was converted into a pub and a restaurant, and there's still people who we see today who remember going there when it was a pub and restaurant, but it wasn't without its difficulties, and eventually it went bust for the final time, and our grandmother said, we should look at converting it into a care home. So in 1984, it opened up as a residential care home, and we had the same tenant from 1984 right the way through until 2012, and that company found itself in a number of difficulties in 2012, and the chap who owned the company then wished to retire. So we took the business on at that time, really, because we kind of realised we had three options, which was pick it up ourselves and run it, secondly find another tenant for the business, or thirdly find another use for the building. And whilst the kind of the bones of a business were there, we thought that there's something that we could get stuck into, and hopefully turn the business around and get it to preserve the building long term, but also have it as another income stream to supplement our farming business. And that's something that we did. It wasn't easy. We learned an awful lot about care very quickly, and the difficulties there is in the care industry.
And red tape.
We always think that there's a lot of...
At least you've got a background with that with farming.
Well, we always think there's a lot of red tape in farming, and I always say to people, if you think there's a lot of red tape and paperwork in farming, you need to go and visit a care home, because it's by far and away there's an awful lot more paperwork. So we ran a business in there for 7 years, and just before Christmas this year, we took the decision to sell the business. CFAS Care have come in and taken on the business that we built, and they've signed a new lease. So we now have a long-term lease in place, and it means that we can kind of go back and concentrate on the things that we are better at than care. But it's safeguarded what is a really important building and site in terms of the history of the country, really, because of the historical nature of the site. and it was the home of Mary Tudor, who was Henry VIII's sister, and she was the Queen of France. So it's the site of where Mary and her husband Charles Brandon had their family home, and she actually died at Westthorpe Hall on the site. So we feel like we've safeguarded what is something that's really quite important for our next generation at least anyway.
Now you're both involved in the Suffolk show, and before we started recording we were actually talking about that. It'll be coming up very shortly, very shortly after this episode comes out. Brian, what's coming up at the show this year?
Well, you're involved as well because you've been roped in, so you can't put it all on us. So you could be actually explaining this yourself.
I could be, really. It's not how this podcast works. I'm in charge here.
The Suffolk show, which is coming up at the end of May. The Suffolk Agricultural Association's charitable objective is to educate general public, farmers and school children about farming in the countryside. And we have been given a new remit and area to basically do this on show day. And so we've been, as a group of farming ambassadors that I've pulled together from Suffolk, including yourself.
Not from Suffolk,
anyway.
We don't mention that.
But you have a skill set we needed, so we've gone across the border to basically do a farming demonstration called Farming Live, where we're going to be doing a live display through the show days, a story about growing oilseed rape and how it's grown in the countryside by farmers and what it goes on to be used in manufacturing and what products actually come out at the end of it. So that's going to be one part of it. Then we're going to have another part which you two are sort of heading up. So and I've seen the list of people. We're going to have a Meet the Farming Hero. So Suffolk food and farming heroes are going to be interviewed, and hopefully we can sort of get details about how they got involved in farming, what they do on their own businesses, what environmental credentials they have. And so general public can ask questions to these people directly. They can ask questions through the oilseed rape story about how farming and what goes on in the countryside. And then we're using Suffolk machinery, so Suffolk manufactured machinery, as the demonstration. And then we're going to sort of go into a little bit more detail into the combine, the drill, the sprayer at different times through the show. But it's going to be a rolling full programme from 9 till 5. So it's going to be something new, that's probably the first time that they've had moving farm machinery in a ring at the show for, well, certainly my memory. So yeah, it's a really exciting project that we're all getting our teeth into, and hopefully it should be good on the day.
It's been really, really good. Please listeners, do come along. 29th and 30th of May. With that in mind, and obviously, I mean, agricultural shows in many cases have been going for decades and decades and decades. But do you think, as a sector and as a community, farmers themselves are becoming better at the PR side, at selling farming?
I think the British agricultural brand is starting to move, and farmers getting more aware. Social media has had a massive impact on the agriculture industry, because gone are the days when a farmer would sit in his farm office and then go and sit on a tractor, listen to the radio, wouldn't have any communication with anyone. Whereas now on our Twitter account we've got just over 5,000 followers. We're following 4,000. You can then pick up your phone, see what someone's doing in the next county, in the other side of the country, in another world, apart in sort of Canada or America, and we're seeing what's going on, and we're communicating directly with these people. So social media has really sort of elevated farming as a brand, and that's allowed general public to see and hear what's going on, for its good and its bad. With social media there is good bits and there's obviously can be some bad bits, but we are open, and farming is a much more sort of interesting place to be. And so I think certainly the British brand of farming is really improving and starting to get sort of movement within lots of different places.
Yeah, I think from a wildlife and conservation point of view, I think social media has really shown a much wider audience the real benefits that farming and agriculture can have. Traditionally, farming has always been hijacked by some of the NGOs and some of the bad press. Everything is about declines, and actually posting videos and photographs and updates actually has shown the ability of farmers to actually demonstrate what they have and the good work that they do. It doesn't mean that everything is perfect, but what it does do is it shows that there is a very wide range of farmers and land owners and land managers who actually really care about their farmland and wildlife, and are able to show the general public what it is they're doing, and hopefully that will galvanise people to support. When we're talking about public money, public goods, and increasing biodiversity, it actually gives people the opportunity to show that they can do the work that has benefits, and we can actually kind of hit the people who want to see wildlife numbers increase, and kind of hopefully they have a bit more faith in farmers, that they're out there doing the right thing a lot of the time.
Part of your identity as a strategic farm, and this is a buzzword, and it's a word that could mean lots of different things to lots of different people, but it's about building a resilient future, both for this farm and perhaps for the sector as a whole. What does that actually mean? But if it's a 6-year process, isn't it? Yeah. It says you're a strategic farm for 6 years. If you get to the end of those 6 years and you're more resilient, what does that actually mean? What does it look like?
6 years' time, hopefully we are applying less but maintaining our output.
Okay.
And so if we're not over-investing into growing crops, but we're still getting the same or better from those crops in a more sympathetic manner, and our environment is better off because we're not applying the pesticides, we're not applying as much nitrogen fertiliser, we're not overdoing the inputs, then the business will be in a strong position, because inflation is all going to make everything more expensive. And so we've got to be very careful that at the end of the day, farming is a business. We're not here to make a loss. We are a family business. We have 6 partners. We all have families. And so we have to view this as a business. And that's what we've always said all the way along. If any of our management starts to that we're getting a regular loss on a crop, or certain fields aren't performing, or another enterprise is sort of becoming a bit of a drain on the business, we've really got to be cutthroat business people.
Yep.
And that's a little bit sometimes forgotten, that the general public just think that, we're just going to produce food. But at the end of the day, we've got to be profitable to make us good at what we do elsewhere. So if the crops aren't making money, then it's very hard to justify spending time doing the conservation. And if the conservation payments that we're getting from different schemes and stewardship schemes, they need to be the right level to make sure that we're getting the finance back to make sure we do it properly. So being resilient is trying to apply less but get more out of it, to mean that our business can do everything that we want to do, to mean that the environment, our farming, the business is there for future generations.
Right, it's time to get on the soapbox. I'm actually going to ask both of you to do this. That's okay.
Right.
Simply because you'll both come up with different ideas. This is an opportunity to speak for 1 minute on a subject of your choice. Could be anything at all, farming or non-farming related. Patrick, do you have an idea? Yeah? What is your subject?
Data recording.
Data. Okay, you have to talk for 1 minute on data recording from now.
So for a good number of years, farmers always have been beaten with the stick of farmland bird numbers are in decline, farm wildlife is in decline, the rivers are dirty and polluted, the species that we want are all disappearing. What we have is a lot of farmers, a lot of landowners who are very passionate about reversing these declines and doing really good conservation work on their farms. And in order for this to be able to continue, we have to be able to demonstrate that the work we do really works. So how do we do that? How will DEFRA be able to demonstrate to the Treasury that the environmental stewardship schemes work? And that for me is people going out and recording what they see. It's doing bird counts, butterfly counts, dragonfly counts, it's sampling your soil, it's doing earthworm counts. If you can't do that, it's getting other people to come on farm and do it for you. It's finding naturalists who are really, really keen, or it's being involved with projects like the Big Farmland Bird Count that the GWCT run, and making sure that all that data goes to your biodiversity recording centres and the places that are going to use it properly.
Pretty good. Oh, it's so true. As a subject, it's one of the things that baffles me, especially about stewardship, that you have all these prescriptions, and in many cases, I mean, not everyone does now, but you have a natural language advisor who comes out and speaks everything through, and you have regular meetings. But actually, if you don't have that baseline, what are you going to achieve, and where are you going anyway?
Yeah, there's many factors that can make things fail.
Yeah.
But actually, we want to look at the successes and the interventions that work, and let's celebrate what we do, what we know that works, and the benefits we have. We know that if you manage some grassland and put a barn owl box up in an area where there's barn owls, chances are you're going to have barn owls breeding. That is a success. And if we can take every little bit like that and just increase it on every farm, then we're going to do some real good. And it doesn't have to be to the detriment of farming, to food production. It's working a system where everything works together and fits in with each other.
Brian, have you got something?
How am I going to follow that?
That was pretty good, I'd say.
I have got a thought.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is your thought?
I have a sort of saying that is farming to potential, not hope. And so
Okay.
I'm going to try and sum this up in a minute.
That is a challenge. Okay, you ready? Your 1 minute starts now.
Yeah, so farmers have the idea of farming to hope, which they always say, we're going to farm to, we're going to get 10 tonne, this crop is going to get 10 tonne, or going to be 12 tonne, and they don't actually understand what potential they have in that field, and so they don't actually manage their inputs to actually make sure that they are either going to get that, or they're overdoing their inputs or underdoing their inputs. And so what we've done over the last 3 years is we've sort of assessed every single field by a very straightforward system of doing establishment counts. So going to every single field, we count how many plants have come up a 50 centimetre run of the coulter, do this multiple times over the field, so I know exactly how many plants I've got. From that calculation, I can then work out what my overwinter losses are, so then next season I can make educated decisions about what seed rates I need to be going forward. And so...
5 seconds.
5 seconds already? That's not fair. You did 30 seconds.
A minute is so... Yeah, goes over so quickly. Thank you very much.
Quite all right. Got me out of a hole.
Plans for the year ahead. Is there anything happening on the farm or outside of the farm that you're particularly looking forward to for this year?
There's some big things coming up. Suffolk Show, Farming Live, for me, massive opportunity for the association to bridge the gap with the general public. Come and ask us questions. For me, that is going to be a really big thing, and I'm very grateful that I've got a team of 10 very good stewards who have been passionate about it. Farming Live at the Suffolk Show. Also, in a week's time, I'm chairman of the Suffolk Agricultural Association School Farm Fair, where we've got 4,500 school children coming to the showground to learn about where their food comes from, what goes on in the countryside. And it's another interactive day where schools come and see first-hand, interactive, fun, interesting, loads of stuff going on. So for me, those two initiatives are key for sort of outside of the farm. Back at home, I just want to produce a cracking wheat crop. Potentially, I could do with some rain.
Would be nice.
We've had 5 million 6 weeks, or 6 million 5 weeks, which at the moment, when the wheat's going through construction phase and now looking to crack on and produce the bumper crops that they potentially have at the moment, because they are looking pretty good.
Yeah, it's fine. I start outdoor lambing in a week's time, so it's going to start pouring with rain just as we start.
Well, it's cricket season coming up as well.
Exactly.
So it's going to start raining.
Hopefully it's going to rain. Potentially it may not.
So, yeah.
Genuinely.
But other than that, I think there's loads of stuff going on. Just keep looking at what we're doing on social media and keep asking us questions. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, I think for me it's making sure we've got other income streams. So it's looking at all the assets the farm has and making sure that we are still diversifying wider than farming to just covering a few of our bases. For me, this summer is about kind of putting my money where my mouth is as well, and going out and doing more recording, making sure that we are ringing and we're nest finding and we're monitoring barn owl boxes and we're doing butterfly counts and we're counting the dragonflies on the ponds we've restored, making sure that we've got our data in place so we can show the benefits and show what works. And also for us, it's being able to show people on Twitter what is going on and demonstrating that all these things are working and these species are benefiting from the work and that anyone can do it. Anyone who has a bit of land to manage, however big or small, can have wildflowers, can have pollinators. Anyone who has a pond can restore it, can have clean water, can have newts and dragonflies. So if everyone does their bit, we can all kind of build this big ecosystem that is this country.
For anybody who's not following on social media already, where do they go?
We are at the Barker Boys or hashtag Farm Wildlife. If you hashtag Farm Wildlife, you'll find an awful lot of posts that we've done to demonstrate what we have and what we see happening every day. There's more coming on in the near future, but do follow us at the Barker Boys.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. It's been a really good chat. And yeah, wish you all the luck for the year ahead.
And you, thank you very much.
And the Suffolk Show, 29th and 30th of May.
Farming Life, come and see us.
Yeah, come and see us at Farming Life. That was me talking with Brian and Patrick Barker on their farm in Suffolk. Patrick and Brian really are forward-thinking, driven individuals within farming, and it's really exciting to see what they're doing on their farm. So thank you guys for speaking to me. We didn't have time to talk about their involvement with LEAF or Patrick's involvement with the Nature Friendly Farming Network, but just giving a shout out to both of those organisations. And once again, as Patrick was saying, please do follow them at the Barker Boys or search for hashtag Farm Wildlife. I also want to give a shout out to Eat Farm Now, which is a brand new digital hub for the world's very best podcasts, vlogs and blogs, all to do with food and farming. It was founded by Simon Haley and fellow podcaster at Rock and Roll Farming, Will Evans. So please do check that out at eatfarmnow.com. Next time on Meet the Farmers, I will be speaking to Helen Browning, who is, among other things, Chief Executive of the Soil Association. She's an organic farmer in Wiltshire, and I'll be travelling down to the southwest to speak to her, so I'm very excited for that. In the meantime, you can find all episodes of the podcast at thinkingcountry.com. You can also find previous episodes on iTunes and now on SoundCloud. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at Benji_Eagle or read blogs at thinkingcountry.com. I'll look forward to you joining me next time.